Welcome back to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're honored to be with our next guest, the comedian Ron James. We're talking about his new book, All Over the Map, and we'll dive into that in just a second. But Ron, how are you doing?
Jim Dandy, can't complain, up here in the Great White North, just hanging out, waiting for the curse of COVID to pass like you guys down south.
Yes, indeed. Well, we're hoping that things do return to normal. That will give you a chance to come visit as well, because I know we were talking about barbecue before we jumped on, but give us a little bit of your backstory, because there's some really cool tie-ins to chasing your dream in Los Angeles, being a stand-up comedian, having your own TV show. So you got a lot of really cool storylines, but give us a little bit of your background and then we'll talk about the book.
Well, I started after I graduated with a history degree in university. I actually, majored in binge drinking and minored in hot knives. As you know, I'm from a day where a hashtag was something you got from getting too close to the hash knives. So anyway, I've grown up, thankfully. But I got into Second City in Toronto, which was the Canadian arm of Chicago Second City, which was the mothership. And I worked with those guys for 10 years, and we sold the show to Ron Howard's company, Imagine TV, which brought several of us to Los Angeles. And we shot 6 half-hour shows a week. It was sold to syndicated channels across the United States in the early 90s. And we were in Newsweek on Tuesday with the quote, "This is the cult show you have to watch this year." We were canceled on Thursday, and on Monday I was chest deep in a hole with my buddy's father's landscaping company, pulling a rotted bush at a Robert Urick's front yard. And Robert Urick walked out the front door dressed like a baronial master, headed to the Sport of Kings that afternoon at Will Rogers Ranch to play some polo. And I was like a troll in a hole, smeared in mud. And my buddy Jay said, "Hey, how you doing, Bob?" Who just played Jake Spoon on Lonesome Dove, points to me in the hole and said, "This is my buddy Ron. He's an actor too." But I don't think Jake Spoon had enough time to sit around and discuss the Stanislavski method's impact on contemporary American cinema. But I hung in there. And one of the great things about Los Angeles was it got me writing and being responsible for my own career, which of course is the ethos of the American dream, that the individual is responsible for their own happiness. Unfortunately, in some instances with the plague over the last few years, me was allowed to trump we. When that happens, everybody loses. And I'm no biblical scholar, but love thy neighbor as thyself seems to make sense to me. Anyway, I stayed down there and I started writing my first one-man show, Up and Down in Shaky Town, One Man's Journey Through the California Dream. And I started that at these funky coffee houses on Ventura Boulevard, man. It's when the coffee scene was just setting in. It was like neo beatniks, right? I'd throw my name in the hat with 30 other hopefuls. Anyway, I came back to Canada, and believe it or not, speaking of Nashville, I happened to get a small role. Well, I wouldn't say small role, a supporting role with the late, great Jim Varney in one of his films, Ernest Brides Again. And here I was, a Canadian kid shooting in Vancouver in the company of Republicans from Nashville. And I was telling them the stories of meeting Americans for the first time, and they laughed and laughed and laughed. And I just thought they were my stories, but there was a universality to it. And the one story that in particular that stays out was, I remember when I was a kid in Canada, America was this mystical land that lived in the beyond, used to be able to order a 2-man submarine from the back of a DC comic book, and it said on it, good for up to under 6 feet of water. And I remember seeing the 2 kids in the 2-man sub shooting torpedoes in a ship and thinking, wow, it's only $20. But order stamped all over it was order void in Canada. The only thing I could get in Canada in the wintertime was pneumonia. And I remember camping with my family in the summer of 1969. And we had one of those tent trailers you weren't allowed to touch the canvas walls of when it was raining or it would leak. I'm sure I've lost the millennials on this old guy's reference, but you weren't allowed. And I couldn't stop touching the tent because I was wondering, is it going to be a tidal wave? Are you going to drown? Are you going to wake up, drown? What? But America pulled into the campground. I'll never forget it. They pulled into the campground, pulling a 60-foot chrome-plated, hermetically sealed Airstream living unit. I remember looking at that at 11 years old and going, oh my God, it's the Jetsons. The Jetsons were here. And they were so friendly and so magnanimous. And they had that post-war confident swagger that came from belonging to the nation that won World War II. You know, their wives wore tennis skirts and looked like Brenda Lee. The guys wore white shoes and golf pants, and they were affable and gregarious and magnanimous. And they invited us over, 2 families over, to watch the moon landing. Okay. And they gave the kids a tray of grape tang, grape flavored tang. I hadn't even seen the orange stuff yet, brother. And that night, when America took one giant leap for mankind, they plugged a color TV into the side of their trailer, and we watched the moon landing. They plugged a color TV into their trailer. We didn't even have a color TV at home. Dad thought it was a passing fad. They could plug a TV in the side of the trailer. I wasn't even allowed to touch the walls of mine. So this resonated through my life. So that when I went to that that carnivores arena of Los Angeles and began climbing out of the trench, the comedy trenches every day to land the elusive sitcom role, I ended up becoming the spokesman for Texas tourism, which was a very interesting gig to get at the time. During the first Persian Gulf War, I had the dubious honor knowing that Saddam Hussein might have got a chuckle out of me in the bunker. But they're award-winning ads, and then I got some guest spots on shows, but it was never enough to plan. You know, I had a daughter. We wanted to have another one. And so I hopped the border, came back home, and wrote that show, Up and Down a Shaky Town, One Man's Journey to the California Dream. But it was the hard and fast rules of the Enlightenment that the individual is responsible for their own happiness. Unfortunately, at that point in time, and for a long time, for the last 40 years, really, it's more is never enough. The measurement of what success is was driven by this Gordon Gekko level of greed that I couldn't even hope to aspire to. All I wanted to do was my work. Fame is such a strange and elusive commodity. It's like Jim Carrey said a couple of weeks ago. He said, I hope that everybody who wants to get rich and famous gets there, because they'll realize it's not the ticket to happiness. And, you know, I mean, I can be just as excited seeing caribou move through a foggy dawn on the tundra as I can with 2,000 people laughing. Yeah. And so anyway, I came back home and put the show up, got good reviews, took the best few minutes from that show, I took a tight 8 to 10 from there and began honing that through amateur nights and started over. But it was Joseph Campbell's book, Hero of a Thousand Faces, that really did influence me to follow my bliss. And it's the only reason I'm talking to you, is because 25 years ago, I took that first step. And it's not been without its losses. You know, the marriage went south. I was on the road too much. But I have 2 beautiful daughters, 32 and 27, and they're throwing a barbecue for me tomorrow night when the book launches, right? And I had a father who was really funny, and I had a mother who loved to laugh. I was raised in a neighborhood. You know, the Canadian, Atlantic Canada is an awful lot like the American South. It's like William Faulkner said about the South. The past isn't history here, it isn't even past. And that's very analogous to Atlantic Canada. You know, my mother used to say in the 1940s, when she'd bring a boyfriend home, the first thing her father would ask the fella is, who's your father? Because they wanted to know what they were about. They wanted to know what kind of lineage they were, right? And I mean, you know, there's still guys in their late 50s, early 60s looking to line up some schmuck for a sucker punch for Bird Dog and his girlfriend at the grade 11 high school dance. The past isn't history here. It isn't even past, you know. And now with COVID, you know, a lot of us are reaching out to our old girlfriends, man. It's wild. It's just wild. and you'll see her smile and you'll go, oh my gosh, I'm time traveling. Look at you.
Well, let's talk about the book, because you do have really some cool storylines for the book in terms of journaling for over 20 years and bringing those kind of storylines into this book. And so all over the map is the book. Talk about kind of writing the book, the process.
The journals were very helpful, and this was in the days before social media, not to disparage it entirely, but Facebook redefined the meaning of friendship, right? A friend used to be somebody who'd help you move a coach on a rainy Saturday afternoon. Now a friend is somebody who likes the photo you posted of the pork chops you had for supper. And we're all in that same boat, really. But I kept my moleskins with me on the road. Whenever a tour would start, I'd crack a new moleskin, and I'd always get that, oh, Hemingway did this. One of those thoughts. And so, yeah, I might not be covering the Spanish Civil War, but anyway, I'm in northern Saskatchewan in November, so maybe I can write something about it. But one of the nicest things that occurred, and this was before I developed any kind of national notoriety in Canada, on TV, was people would just start talking to me. And it was, as Joseph Campbell says in Here of a Thousand Faces, if you follow your bliss, there will be hidden boons along the way. There'll be signposts that you're on the right journey, right? There'll be people to suggest where you might ford the river or find your way through the forest. And a lot of times you might hit a dead end. A lot of times you might take a wrong turn, as we all do. But it was an embrace of people and place. And I happened to be traveling the country at a time when, the great amounts of money were being made in Alberta with the fossil fuel industry. There was guys making, $120 an hour driving a truck the size of a Belgian Dutchie, and they never had grade 10 education. It's a lot like North Dakota, right? It's a lot like some places in Texas, a lot of similarities. And I had windows on these worlds. Indigenous people spoke to me. I know the term Indian is still used in the States, but say First Peoples are Indigenous in Canada. And they gave me a window on their world, man. They told me about their lives, right? They told me about the 60 scoop. They told me about the injustices. They told me about their dreams. And people would, and I was always a big fan of that NPR dude, Studs Terkel. Do you remember him? He wrote Working, and he wrote American Dreams Lost and Found, and also The Last Good War. And I read those diligently in my early days as a Second City actor, and when I'd have to go out and do monologues and things, because they were real, they were substance, it was heart. And that's what I was getting for people. I was getting heart, besides a good payday, because I came back to Canada broke from LA and 48 grand in US debt with the IRS breathing down my neck, because I had an accountant at the mall who did my income tax and did it wrong. But here's the only thing that can happen in Los Angeles that's perfect. The accountant at the mall also played an accountant in an episode of Mannix.
Only in LA, correct?
Only in LA, right? So anyway, I came back here and I started, and oh boy, this makes me feel good talking about those days, because it's the story, it's the journey, and that's what it is. It's all about the journey, not the grail at the end of the trail. But I did get my grails here, I created 2 television series. One was called Blackfly. Hold on to your hat. It was satirized current social and political trends in the context of the 18th century Canadian fur trade. Good one, Ron. That's going to sell overseas. That's not too myopic.
Specific, yeah.
But you know who was in it with me? Colin Mockery was in it with me. The great improviser Colin. Yeah. And his wife was the creator, actually, of my talk show, which brought me down to Los Angeles. And we've all worked together for 40 years. And then I hit the road hard. And that was wonderful, because I'd be driving through blizzards a Yeti wouldn't wander. All right. And you'd be in these prairie blizzards like you'd hit in Wyoming, where you can't see your hand in front of your face and you're in the friggin' car, right? And so it was the venture. It was my hero's journey. And it started with a victory in baby steps. But I knew I'd have to play the theaters, because the club scene is so lean in Canada.
Mm.
Right? That's the big difference between us in terms of comedy here. I mean, you've got Toronto, where I am, is pretty well the lodestone of the industry for comedy, and a lot of great comedians have come from here. Russell Peters, Colin Mockery, Mike Myers and I were in Second City together. Jim Carrey started at Yucks a million years ago. Howie Mandel. So it's really exported an awful lot of great comics, and I think a lot of it has to do with how close they were to the American border in Buffalo, and being inundated, besides their talent, but being inundated by pop culture. I mean, I was way up the road. I was way facing the Atlantic of Nova Scotia. I mean, I got one channel growing up. But what I did get a lot of were people around my kitchen table who told stories. Mm-hmm. And when I read Southern authors, I think that the South has a strong oral culture. And I listen to, on the road, I listen to an awful lot of your artists. I mean, I listened to Johnny Cash's 5 American recordings. And of course, I was a huge fan of Steve Earle. I was a huge fan of his son. Yeah, come on, driving through Memphis in the rain. It's beautiful. And Guy Clark as well, Townes Van Zandt. So I developed an ear for language, and language became my mandate. And I had 2 big influences in stand-up before I answered the call. One was Billy Connolly, the great Scottish comedian, just for freedom of performance and physicality. And the other one was Dennis Miller, his first special, Black and White. I loved that first special. But in my days in America, I did develop not a bad Bobby De Niro impression. Huh? And the thing with Bobby, you can put him anywhere. Huh? Anybody say? I paint houses. Paint houses. So oh, poor old Bobby. People say, where'd you get that? I said, I don't know, but De Niro put my kids through university. So anyway, brother, I stayed here and I just started, it was 1 gig at a time. And I can say it with pride and integrity that I pulled my career up from the muck. And the big grail here, of course, is Just for Laughs, where all your great comedians come. And I love watching a top of the line American comic, man. I saw cats from the South. I saw them from New York. I saw them from LA. I remember Zach Galifianakis and I were sharing a bus to the airport the first year that he performed. And I said, hey, Zach, it was in Montreal Gazette. I said, hey, Zach, they quoted your joke. They quoted both of our jokes, right? And he said, really? I said, such a sweetheart of a man, right? And I still think Between Two Ferns is maybe the funniest thing that's ever been on. I'll watch it on the road, just laugh my whole off. And just to see Sean Penn threaten to punch him in the face, it's just, it's wonderful. Charlize Theron laughing in his face. Anyway, we're on the bus together, and I said, you got a joke? He goes, really? I said, wow, that was pretty frightening last night. Because Theatre Saint Denis is the big gala theater, right? 1,700 people. And he said, I've never seen that many people at once in one place watching comedy. I said, and we'd already had the Halifax Comedy Festival here with 1,000 seaters, the same as the Winnipeg one with 1,200, which used to be one of the stops on the old vaudeville circuit, right? And because it's so close to North Dakota. And I said, why, Zach? I said, how many does your club hold? He goes, well, when it's really packed, we can get 30 in there. And wow. But this is the difference between America and Canada. You can get to the top of your game in America in a small club like that and take a trajectory so that your face is on lunch boxes somewhere in Rwanda. I mean, you export to the 4 corners of the world, and Canada is slowly getting there. But I'm not telling tales out of school here either. I think that the calling of stand-up is paid a great deal of lip service in Canada, and you're measured by how famous you are elsewhere. I think there's, to a lesser degree, it's the same in Britain. But I just became happy with the work. So each year, for 14 years, well, I mean, I had that television show for 5, but I wrote 5 1-hour specials myself prior to getting the series. And each year I'd go out on the road and I'd hone a third of it, and then I'd come back and research the other 2/3. Yeah. Then we'd shoot it before a live audience. Great rooms too, whether it's the old Vaudeville House in Toronto, the Winter Garden, or the Royal in Victoria, or the Pantages where Charles Chaplin and Buster Keaton used to play in Winnipeg. And so all those great old vaudeville houses had this great spirit of unity, you know. And one of my pilgrimages has to be to the Ryman someday. That's on my list. And I know August 31st, Steve Earle and Los Lobos were playing there, but I couldn't get down, you know. Anyway, so we shoot those. I put them to the network. They put them on New Year's Eve, and they drew consistently anywhere between 850 to 1.5 million people. And then we did this series. And then I wrote 5 more specials with a couple of collaborators who had worked with me, and one guy had been on the road. And that's always great. I love when 3 comedians can get together, and just because we've got this shorthand, and it's exactly the same in the States and in Britain. It's the language of your tribe. It's an exclusive shorthand. And I'm starting again because I start a new tour in November in Eastern Canada. And I'm just going to sit around with those cats and riff, because we managed to stream some shows from my living room during the pandemic. And I finished my book. So yeah, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I think. And I think I can safely say it's not going to be an oncoming train, unless the ex-girlfriend decides to make a move.
Well, what do you hope that readers take away from the book?
That life is all about the long haul. And there are gems the universe drops in your lap if you take the time to follow your bliss and know that life is about celebrating the small victories. It's one step at a time, one gig at a time, and nothing comes without putting your shoulder to the mule and plowing. You got to do the work.
Yeah,
I was always amazed at comedians who would get a tight 10 minutes, or they'd get their 45, and that'd be that. And I thought, Neil Young has written 27 albums. Johnny Cash wrote 1 million songs. Why do we think that that's just enough? And I see it with some of the young kids in the clubs, you know. I went the other night and I said, that's just lazy comedy. You need somebody to tell you to smarten up. You know, a doctor's got to do his job properly. An engineer can't cut a corner. We should adhere to the same respect for our calling as any other profession does. And that's what Lorne Michaels said to me once. He said, I gave Mike Myers his star on the Walk of Fame in Toronto in 2003. And it was a great honor. But I had the anchor spot, and Robbie Robertson was there getting his, and Robbie Robertson walked past me and said, hey, kid, great speech. So I thought, hey, man, right on. I'm on the right track. And in Montreal years ago, I had Don Rickles sign my poster. And he said, funny is as funny does as you are, and you are. And I tucked that away as emotional collateral, because 6 months later, I was stuck in a blizzard on the spooky Caribou Road, and I was white knuckling my way on some widow-making strips of asphalt, trying to make a gig so I could be up at 6 a.m. for an interview with the DJ in the morning. And it was all worth it. Even though I played a high school gymnasium that night, I made the gig. Don't get me wrong, you know, I'm not complaining, but it's as Mike used to say, you know, that's just the universe testing you to see how bad you want it. And I don't breathe that level of rarefied air, but I do know how hard the work is. And I do know that staring at a blank page is the same for everybody. Got to do the work. Yeah. That's what my book taught me, that I did the work. And I'm glad that when I was on the road, I was diligent enough to keep my journals. And I was blessed enough to come from a place that celebrated story, right? That celebrated story. And I guess it's a new door that's opening. And I just want to make this third chapter of my life productive and exciting and engaging with a world that has so much to offer. And that's not fame, because I've got the quote from Billy Connolly on the start of my book: chase fame, see what that does to your soul. He gets it, because he was all about the work. And then the second one is follow your bliss. And the third one's from a Canadian poet. But I can't say enough to emphasize, if any young people are listening, it's got to be about the journey, you guys. There's disappointments. People won't like you. People will like you. Your peers will be jealous. Your peers will be supportive. It's going to be the full catastrophe, but you got to stay the course, and you got to keep your eyes on the prize, fixed to the horizon, and have your goals that are realistic, and just keep going forward.
Yeah, love it. Wrap up with where we can follow your efforts and obviously where we can buy the book. So once again, the book is all over the map. Where do we go to follow you online, and where do we go to get the book?
You can buy the book at Barnes & Noble in the States. You can also order it on Amazon, of course. What can't you order on Amazon? I'm sure Tutankhamun's finger is available on there, isn't it? And Tutankhamun's finger. And you can also get it on the Penguin Random House site. It's also available in audio and ebook. But if you want to say hello on Facebook, it's Ron James Comedy. That's capital R, capital J, capital C. And on Instagram, I'm available as Ramblin' Ron James. That's no G. It's like the old Allman Brothers song, Lord, I was born a ramblin' man. Ramblin' Ron James. And on Twitter, which I don't do much, I find it so contentious, but still, I suppose I should. It's called The Ron James Show, capital T, capital R, capital J, capital S.
Well, Ron, thank you for all you do. Thank you for sharing your story, talking about the book, and coming on the show. Thank you very much.
And thank you to you guys in America for inspiring my faith and my funny.